What's the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Tactical Living Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Welton, joined by Sergeant Welton. Glenn, how are you?
I'm excellent.
We are going to talk about the thing that nobody talks about today, and that is unspoken fears and what first responders are afraid to maybe admit.
I was last night, I was actually looking at something because, we're talking about traveling to Dubai next year or traveling for a vacation. And I was looking at this dinner in the sky to where it literally, you go, it's 50 meters in the air and you're sitting at a table and there's a chef in the middle and he's cooking your dinner. One of my major fears is heights. And I was weighing all the pros and cons with it and seeing if would it be worth it? It seems kind of neat because then you get this outside experience to where you're just hanging literally from a cable up in the sky, eating a 3-course meal, looking at the whole skyline around you and everything. And then I think about the one time that Ashley and I went into this, like, not a hot air balloon, but it was like a balloon at a zoo.
It was a hot air balloon, but it was tethered to the zoo.
Yeah. And we go up and I was petrified. Like, I literally had to hold on to the rail the entire time. Like, I was frozen and it just freaked me out so bad. And it still gives me the heebie-jeebies to think about. And
here I am having people who just got their pilot license begging me to fly out there so that I can jump out of their aircraft with them. So I think that that's definitely valid, right? A lot of people are afraid of heights, but I also think that there are a lot of very common fears when it comes to being a first responder. And I think one of the biggest ones is probably fear of financial instability. There are a lot of people who worry about how they're going to support their family, especially if they get injured or they're forced to be able to retire early. And one remedy to this is to make sure that you're building an emergency fund. And I know a lot of people are strapped for cash and that might sound difficult, but even if you're just putting a tiny bit away or you're thinking outside of the box and I know somebody right now, like their new thing is to buy things on Facebook Marketplace. So maybe once a week, you and everybody in your family can choose an item that you no longer use and then decide to sell that on Facebook Marketplace and then use that money to be able to, stockpile into an emergency fund.
Having that, it's a legitimate fear, and being able to plan accordingly. Like, I think most fears you're able to combat and address them before they turn into a real problem. And I think especially in the financial realm, being able to address that easily is being able to invest, being able to plan for it, plan for that early on. Don't wait until right when you're going to retire.
Here's a big one, Clint, especially for law enforcement, is the fear of job loss or departmental politics. And I think
there's stuff you're never going to be able to avoid, like departmental politics, but you can remove yourself from those situations, or you can learn how to make those politics work for you.
Well, not only that, but also having contingencies. So I'm thinking about, like, let's break this down to a real tactical aspect of something that happened to you when your department, your city went bankrupt. And, you made sure that you had a contingency plan in place.
And I forget about that. And that was one of those things, we talked about this round and round. It was a stressful time because we didn't know, when I first started working within my agency, I got a pink slip. I was there for 8 months and I got a pink slip, and they were threatening layoffs. And then we reduced our numbers substantially. We had career fairs with different agencies coming to our department to offer us jobs. I was actually hired by 3 different agencies during this time frame. And then Ashley and I spoke about this early and said, you know what, let's just stick it out. Let's just ride through this. And I'm definitely glad I did that. But it's having those contingencies. It's just because one thing happens, and I look at some of my partners over the years who've lost their jobs, who were forced resigned, whatever it may have been, and see how they're doing now, and they're successful. They're just because they lost their job didn't mean it was into the world. They had to adapt and overcome it and make it into a reality for them.
Yeah, and another thing too is the fear of making a career-ending mistake.
That is something I think if you live in fear of that all the time, there's something else going on. If it takes a lot to lose your career or something really negative to actually lose your career if you make that mistake.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because you and I recently had a conversation around certain officers to where I'm like, how the fuck did they even make it through the academy? And then we've talked about how a lot of these people coming out of the academy can't even pass their FTO. And so I think that the problem there is a lack of confidence, and that lack of confidence comes from a lack of training. So just because this individual, you have a group of people in the academy, right? And the academy standards have all been decided and chosen. However, not everybody is going to be maintained at those standards, meaning you might just barely pass through, but you should also know if you need a little bit extra. Just like somebody who passes a test, right? Maybe you get a C on a test, a C minus, I guess. And that should be indicative of the fact that you might need a little extra studying, you might need a tutor. Same is to be applied and especially if you're a police officer.
Yeah, and I think something to note on that too is you might be extremely book smart and be really good at passing tests and in a scholastic setting being able to really like shine bright. But when it comes to real world settings where nothing is by the book all the time, like stuff changes and is developing to where there's not a black and white answer to it, being able to adapt and being able to have that training and life experience, like Ashley said, that's where it becomes huge to be able to make a solid answer. I think that really comes down to your own internal values and who you are as a person as well.
I think another thing that a lot of first responders fear is the fear of losing control at home.
I think if you have that fear, having conversations with your spouse, with your loved ones, being able to express, okay, do I have to control any and every situation all the time? And having this understanding is not that you're losing control, is that you just don't have to control everything.
I was so proud of an officer this morning. It was I went to go into my Facebook group. The first thing that I saw when I opened up Facebook was this message. And it's a police officer who said, "Hey guys, I just saw that I'm eligible to retire 6 years from today. So I have decided to enroll back in school, and I'm going to become an EMT now. That way, when I retire, I'll have that to be able to turn to." So the next thing I have on here is the fear of the future, and then who you'll be when you're not on that job anymore.
Well, I think that goes into our previous podcasts that we've talked about too, is not identifying so much as, as a police officer, as that first responder, where your job is not your identity, and having this identity outside of your career is so important, because then when those transitions happen, you're able to say, well, that wasn't me, that this just changed that dynamic.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we were just talking about this with my dad this morning, right? He was asking you're a sergeant, when do you become lieutenant? And he doesn't really understand how things work. And I explained to him that a lot of people will retire as sergeant because it's one of the most cush jobs at most departments. And, you and I kind of talked about things a little bit, but I think it's important to make sure that you're pre-planning for those things now, not only for the sake of like what happens that day that I retire, but also leading up to enjoyment from now until then. And, something that's coming to mind for me is our house. We live in a dream home. We are so, I'm not going to say we're so lucky. We have worked so hard for everything that we have. And in my mind, there are things that I don't want to wait until we sell our house in 10 years to do that to the house or to fix up with the house. 10 years is a long ass time. So putting in that dedication now into the things that you're going to be utilizing or enjoying or spending time with or around. And this can also extend to your relationships between now and the time that you retire.
Yeah, it's filling up your piggy bank as time goes along with investing into your now compared to and into your now and your future, and being able to plan ahead for it. And like you think about financial investments going on into retirement, well, why aren't you investing into your time right now too? I think it's having a balance about everything.
Yeah, and that too, something else that you and I do a great job about. Like for us, when retirement comes, like it's going to be all about, first of all, moving and then traveling, right? And something that we've done a great job with is having a balance between enjoying those things now and then not waiting until, we've traveled the entire world and we continue to. And so not waiting until the future and not being afraid of the future, and then start kind of creating that future and living in that future now.
If you develop it into your routine now, it makes it such an easier transition in the long run, and having a balance with everything.
Yeah, I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below. And as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.